Good evening, dear traveler. I am so glad you found your way here to this quiet hour just before sleep, when the world grows soft and the stars lean in a little closer to listen. My name is Peter Pan, and I have flown over every ocean, slipped through every kind of night, and landed in more strange and wonderful places than I could ever count. But tonight, I want to tell you about someone else's adventure. Someone a little like you, perhaps. Tonight's story is about a boy named Finn, a boy who was afraid of getting lost, in a family where getting lost was considered the greatest honor. And about a map that did something no map had ever done before. So pull your blanket close, let the rain tap softly on the window, and follow me. The night the map appeared, the storm was having an argument with the sea. Thunder rolling low and grumbling across the harbor town of Caldon-Moor, rattling the shutters of every house on Spool Lane. Rain came down not in drops but in curtains, heavy and silver, draped across the rooftops like the sigh of something enormous. And in the tallest, narrowest house at the end of the lane, the one with a weather vane shaped like a compass rose, a boy named Finn was sitting very still at the top of the stairs, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder. 1, 2, 3, 4. Crack! He had been counting for an hour. Finn Aldermore was 12 years old, the youngest of 5 children, and the only one who had never left Caldon-Moor. His father had mapped the Serpent Shelf off the coast of the Renland Isles. His mother had charted the interior of the hollow peaks before Finn was even born. His oldest sister, Dara, was somewhere in the eastern marshes right now, mapping a forest that supposedly moved at night. And his brothers, Cass and Theo, were apprenticed to different cartographers in distant cities, drawing new coastlines and measuring the height of things nobody had measured before. The Aldermores were a family of explorers. Every wall in their home was papered with maps overlapping, layered, some so old the ink had faded to the color of shadows. There was a map of a place called the Drifting Bone Fields hanging above the fireplace. A map of tide paths and moon currents spread across the ceiling of the dining room. And in the hallway, framed in dark wood, was the family motto, written in their grandmother's hand. To go where the map ends is where life begins. Finn hated that motto. Not because he thought it was wrong, but because it felt like a door that everyone else could open and he could not. Every time he looked at it, something small and tight coiled in his chest, a feeling he had no name for, except maybe not yet. Or maybe not me. The lightning flashed again. 1, 2. Crack! Closer now. He should go to bed. He knew that. But the house felt strange tonight. His parents were away, his father on a surveying trip up the northern coast, his mother at a gathering of cartographers 3 towns over. The housekeeper, Mrs. Bram, had gone home before the storm turned serious. And Finn was alone. Not scared, he told himself. Just counting. Then he heard it. A sound from above. Not thunder, softer than that. More like breathing. A slow, low rhythm, almost like the tide. In. Out. In. Out. From the attic. Finn stood up very slowly. The sound came again. Steady. Patient. Like something that had been waiting a long time and was not in any hurry. He told himself it was the wind finding a crack in the roof. He told himself old houses made strange sounds in storms. He told himself a great many things on his way up the attic stairs, none of which he entirely believed. The attic of the Aldermore house was a museum of forgotten journeys. Old trunks with brass latches. Rolled maps tied with ribbon. A broken compass that had belonged to his grandfather. A model ship with no sails. crates of journals, their spines furry with dust. The breathing sound was coming from the far corner, behind a stack of leather cases. Finn moved the cases aside one by one, and they're flat on the wooden floor, as if it had always been there and was only now choosing to be noticed, was a map. It was large, about the size of a tabletop, rolled and tied with a cord the color of dried grass. Finn crouched and picked it up. It was heavier than he expected. And warm, not the cold, papery weight of an old document, but the warm weight of something living. He untied the cord with careful fingers, and the map unrolled itself. That was the first strange thing. He had not unrolled it, it had unrolled itself, spreading open across the attic floor with a sound like a quiet exhale. Finn held very still. The map was unlike anything he had seen in his parents' collection. It was drawn on what looked like pale cloth rather than paper, covered in ink of deep blue and green and a gold that seemed to shift when he tilted his head. It showed coastlines and mountains, rivers and plains, forests of careful cross-hatching, but the edges of it, on all four sides, faded into blank whiteness. Not the whiteness of empty space waiting to be filled, but the whiteness of something not yet decided. And then the map moved. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would make you scream. Just a small breath, a gentle rise and fall along the surface of the cloth, like the chest of something sleeping. In. Out. Finn forgot to be afraid. He leaned closer. Along the bottom edge of the map, in ink so fine it might have been drawn with a single hair, were words he had not noticed at first. You are here. But here is not the whole story. He looked up at the map again. In the very center, a small mark had appeared, a tiny dot, shaped like a footprint. His footprint, he realized, though he did not know how he knew this. The footprint was standing at the edge of the mapped land, right where the color ended and the white began. And then the map whispered. He heard it the way you hear something in a half-dream, not quite with his ears, not quite with his mind, but somewhere in between. The place you are looking for is not on any map, the voice said. It was calm and low, like wind moving through tall grass. It comes into being only when your feet touch the ground. But first, you have to step. Finn sat back on his heels. The storm was still going outside. The rain was still loud on the roof. Everything was exactly as it had been 5 minutes ago. Except that now, a living map was lying open in front of him, and somewhere out beyond the white edge of everything charted and known and safe, there was a land that did not exist yet. A land that would only exist if he walked into it. Finn looked at the family motto, in his mind the words hanging in their dark frame downstairs. To go where the map ends is where life begins. He looked at the blank white edge of the map. He looked at the tiny footprint waiting at the border. And for the first time in his life, the tight, coiled feeling in his chest did not feel like fear. It felt like the moment just before a held breath is finally let go. He reached out and touched the white edge of the map with one finger. The attic filled with the smell of green things and open sky, and the storm outside went very, very quiet. The white edge of the map did not swallow him all at once. It was more like stepping through a doorway that had always been there. Hidden inside an ordinary wall, a doorway you only find when you are finally ready to look. One moment Finn was kneeling on the attic floorboards with the smell of old leather and rain around him. The next, the floorboards were gone, the rain was gone. And he was standing on something that felt like ground but looked like the first stroke of a painting not yet finished. The sky above him was pale and wide, the color of paper held up to a window. The ground beneath his feet was solid enough grass, he thought. Or something very like it, but at the edges of his vision, in every direction he did not look directly, the world was soft and unresolved, shapes waiting to become themselves. A tree to his left was more suggestion than tree. A hill ahead was more feeling than hill. The map was in his hands. He had not remembered picking it up, but there it was, still warm, still breathing. And now, as he stood looking out at the half-made world, something extraordinary happened. With each step he took, the ground firmed beneath him. Where his left foot landed, the grass became grass, real grass, distinct blades, each one catching the pale light differently. Where his right foot landed, a small stone appeared, rounded and gray, exactly the kind of stone that belongs beside a path. And behind him, a path was forming. Not a path he had chosen. A path that was choosing itself, following the logic of where he had walked. He stopped and turned to look. The path stretched back to a shimmer of light, the place where the attic edge of the map must be, though he could no longer see it clearly. The path was real. His footsteps had made it. He looked at the map. The small footprint in the center had moved. It was now precisely where he stood, at the tip of a thin line that traced the path behind him. "You are walking in the right direction," the map said. "Which direction is that?" Finn asked. "Forward," said the map. And it said nothing else. Finn walked. The world built itself around him as he went. A forest assembled itself to his right, tree by tree. Each one arriving just as he turned his attention toward it, as if the forest were shy and only appeared when he wasn't looking too hard. A river materialized to his left, finding its banks and its current and its particular sound as he drew near. He stopped at the edge of it and watched the water figure out which way it wanted to flow. It chose east. He decided he liked the river for that. He crossed it on stones that appeared just before his feet needed them, and on the other side. The land opened into a wide meadow filled with flowers of colors he had no names for, not quite purple, not quite silver. Something in between that the world had not needed before now, but needed here, because he was here, and he was noticing. He had been walking for what felt like an hour when he first saw the creature. It was standing at the far edge of the meadow, where the world was still unformed, where the softness of not yet began. It was tall and thin in the color of fog, and it had no face that he could see, only a smooth pale surface where a face might go. It was perfectly still. It was watching him. Or not watching, exactly. It did not have eyes. But it was aware of him, the way a cold room is aware of an open window. "Map," Finn said quietly, without looking down. "What is that?" The map took a breath. A longer breath than usual. "That," it said carefully, "is a blank." "What does it do?" "It undoes," said the map. "It is what happens when something that was made gets unmade. In a land that only exists because of your steps, the blank is the thing that follows. It erases what you have walked. It returns the world to white." Finn looked back at the path behind him. It was still there, the river, the stones, the meadow, the flowers with their unnamed colors. All of it solid and real and present. "Has it erased anything yet?" he asked. "Look again," said the map. He looked. And this time he saw it at the very far end of the path, near the shimmer where the attic edge had been. The grass was fading. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just gently, quietly, the way a memory fades when you stop thinking about it. The color was leaching out. The blades of grass were losing their distinctness. The path was becoming suggestion again. The blank had not moved. It did not need to move. It was patient in the way that only truly large things are patient. If it erases the whole path, Finn said slowly, does that mean I cannot go back? It means, said the map, that the only way forward is forward. Finn's chest tightened. Not the coiled tight feeling he knew from home. This was different. This was bigger. This was the feeling of standing at the edge of something that could not be undone. A decision that had already been made the moment he touched the white border in the attic. He looked at the blank. It had not moved, but it was closer. He was almost certain it was closer. What happens if it catches me? He asked. The map was quiet for a moment. Then you would not be erased. You would simply be returned to the beginning. But everything you had walked, everything you had made real would be gone. And the land would go back to white. Unfinished. Waiting for the next person willing to step. Finn thought about that. He thought about the river that had chosen east because he had been there to notice it. He thought about the flowers with no names. He thought about the path of stones that had appeared just in time for his feet. He thought about how none of it would exist if he had stayed in the attic, counting seconds between lightning and thunder. Then I won't let it catch me, he said. He turned back to the meadow ahead and walked faster. The world continued to assemble itself around him, a ridge of low hills, a stand of silver-barked trees. A sky that was slowly learning what color it wanted to be, shading itself from pale paper white into the faintest possible blue. Like a sky that was trying on the idea of being a sky for the very first time. Behind him, without turning, he could feel the blank following. Not fast. Not urgent. But steady. Unhurried, the way time is unhurried. And then he came to the edge. Not the edge of the world, or not exactly. It was a cliff, perhaps, or something. Cliffs were the closest word for. The ground ended. Below was not darkness, not a fall, but pure white, the blankest white he had ever seen. Brighter than the unformed edges of the land, brighter than the sky had been when he arrived. It was the white of absolute possibility. The white of something that had never been anything yet. And the map, which had been breathing steadily at his side, went still. Map, he said. No answer. He looked down at it. The surface was no longer shimmering. The footprint in the center, his footprint, had reached the edge of everything drawn, everything inked, everything known. There was nowhere left on the map to walk. He looked out over the white below. He looked back at the meadow, at the silver trees, at the path of real things he had made with his feet. The blank was at the edge of the silver trees now, moving through them without disturbing a single leaf. Simply turning them pale, turning them suggestion, turning them back. In front of him the white edge of everything. Behind him the thing that unmade. And in his hands a map that had run out of answers. Finn stood at the edge of the unfinished world, and for the first time since he had touched the map in the attic, he did not know what to do. The sky above him had almost finished deciding on blue. Almost. For a long moment, Finn did not move. He stood at the edge of the unfinished world with the white void below him. And the blank behind him, and a map that had gone silent in his hands, and he did the only thing left to do. He thought. Not frantically. Not the spinning, tangled kind of thinking that leads nowhere and exhausts everything. But slowly, carefully, The way his mother had once taught him to read a map: start from where you are, not from where you want to be. Look at what is actually there. Not what you fear. Not what you wish. What is there? He looked down at the white below. It was not darkness. It was not a fog. It was the same white that had been at the edges of the meadow, the same white that had been at the borders of the attic map. The white of something not yet decided. The white of before. He looked at the map in his hands. Still and dark, yes. But still warm. Still breathing, faintly, the way a person breathes when they are resting rather than gone. He looked at the path behind him. Most of it had faded now. The river was a suggestion. The flowers were nearly gone. The silver trees were pale as winter light. The blank moved through them without sound, without hurry, absolute in its patience. And Finn understood something. The map had never been showing him where to go. It had been showing him where he had already gone. Every line on it, every coastline and river and stand of trees, all of it had been drawn by his own footsteps, in real time, as he walked. The map was not a guide. The map was a record. Which meant that the map going dark at the cliff edge was not a warning. It was simply honest. It could not show him what came next, because what came next had never been walked before. Not by anyone. Not ever. He looked out over the white. Somewhere behind him, the blank reached the last of the silver trees. Finn closed his eyes. He thought about his father, who had mapped the serpent shelf by getting in a boat and rowing into water no chart had ever marked. He thought about his mother, who had walked into the hollow peaks with nothing but a compass. And the understanding that the mountain would show her its own interior if she paid attention. He thought about Dara and the moving forest, mapping something that would not hold still. He thought about Cass and Theo, drawing new coastlines from the decks of ships that had no guarantee of return. None of them had known what was ahead. They had all stepped anyway. He thought about the family motto. Not with the tight coiled feeling he had always had before. But with something new, something that felt like recognition. To go where the map ends is where life begins. Not a door that others could open and he could not. A door that only opened from the inside. A door that could only be opened by the person standing in front of it, in the dark, without any guarantee of what was on the other side. Finn opened his eyes. He took a breath. And he stepped off the edge. For one single heartbeat there was nothing beneath his foot. Pure white. Pure possibility. The breath of the world held. Then the ground arrived. Not falling, landing. His foot came down on something solid and real, something that had not existed the moment before and existed now completely, a piece of ground that the world had been saving specifically for this step, this foot, this boy. Who had been afraid of getting lost his whole life and had finally gotten lost on purpose. He took another step. Another piece of ground appeared. Then another. Then another. Below him what had been the white void was becoming a valley. A wide, impossible valley of morning light and long grass in the sky that had finally, definitively decided on blue. Not pale. Not almost. A full, committed, enormous blue, the kind of blue that makes you feel the size of the world and glad of it. He was walking on air that was becoming ground. He was descending a path that built itself beneath his feet, step by step, into a hillside of green and gold, and below him. The valley floor was assembling itself in waves, meadows and streams and a forest of trees so tall. Their tops were lost in the blue, trees that had been waiting in the white since before the world had words, waiting for exactly this moment in this boy. He laughed. He could not help it. It burst out of him. sudden and real, the laugh of someone who has been holding their breath for a very long time. Behind him, at the top of the hillside, the blank had reached the cliff edge. It stood there, at the border between what had been and what was being made. And then, quietly, without drama, it stopped. It did not follow him down. It could not. The path Finn was making was too new, too immediate, too fully itself to be unmade. He was walking faster than it could follow. He looked back once, and the blank was very small at the top of the hill, and then it was gone. The map in his hands shuddered. Then it glowed. Then it began to draw. Every step he took down into the valley, the map recorded new lines appearing in that deep blue and green and shifting gold, the blank white of the lower page filling in with the world he was making. Coastlines he had never seen. A river delta fanning out like an open hand. A forest that the map labeled, in the finest possible ink, in handwriting that was somehow his own though he had not written it here. You were here. You made this. He reached the valley floor as the sun ascended, the first sun this valley had ever had, the sun that existed because he had walked far enough to need one. Crested the hills behind him and filled the whole wide space with gold. Finn stood in the light and looked at the map. It was full now, edge to edge, every corner inked and named and real. And at the very center, where the small footprint had always been, there was now not one footprint, but hundreds a trail of them, winding from the attic edge all the way down through meadow and river and cliff and valley, right to where he stood. At the bottom of the map, in the same fine handwriting as before, new words had appeared beside the old ones. The old words said you are here. But here is not the whole story. The new words, written in ink the color of morning light, said now you know how the story is made. Finn read them twice. Then he folded the map carefully, the way you fold something you intend to keep for the rest of your life, and he put it in his pocket. The valley stretched around him, new and entirely real, every blade of grass distinct, every stone placed, every tree tall and rooted and certain of itself. A wind moved through, a warm wind from the west, carrying the smell of something distant and green and not yet discovered. He breathed it in. He was not afraid. And that, dear traveler, is where we leave Finn tonight, standing in a valley that did not exist this morning, in a world he made one step at a time. I have flown over many lands in my long and wandering life. I have seen forests that sing and oceans that remember and mountains that dream. But the lands I love most are the ones like Finn's Valley. The ones that only exist because someone was brave enough to step into the white, into the not yet, into the place where no map could follow. You have that same pair of feet, you know. You have that same white edge waiting at the border of the life you have not lived yet. And somewhere, in an attic or a dream or a quiet moment just before sleep, there is a map that is breathing softly and waiting for your hands. But that is a thought for tomorrow. Tonight, let the valley hold you. Let the new blue sky stretch wide above you. Let the warm wind come. Close your eyes, dear traveler. The path will be there in the morning. Sleep well. Sleep deep. And when you wake, take one step you have never taken before. I will be watching from above, and I will be so very proud of you. Good night.